The Honest Money podcast is powered by 10x Investments, a licensed financial services provider. Consult with your financial advisor and let's 10x your future together.
Hi, Warren and the Honest Money team. Dear Dile here, #1 fan of the Honest Money podcast. I have a question. So if I wanted to rent cost average into an exchange traded fund, is it better to keep the money that I want to rent cost average in my savings account, my bank account, or should I transfer the bulk of the money into my brokerage account and then periodically, monthly, then buy the basket of shares? So basically my question is, does the bulk money that I transfer into the brokerage account earn interest? So is it okay to just leave it there? Or should I leave it in my bank account where it can continue to earn interest as minimal as it would? Thanks.
Thanks so much for your question, Tiatile. We love your questions and your feedback. You certainly help us to kind of direct our content over time. So the question is, for me, it's about phasing in. What's the best way to phase in? And I think you've got two things to consider. One will be the costs of your transactions, and I'll explain that now. And then the second part, which you've identified, is the interest that you're going to earn on the cash while you're phasing in. So let's just talk about the costs for a second. If your bank charges you a transaction fee for transferring money from your savings account to your brokerage account, then you want to try and limit that transaction, the number of transactions, so that you're only paying one transaction fee. If it's a fixed rand amount per transaction, then you definitely want to do one transaction once and save on the costs. If it's a percentage fee where they charge you 0.5% or something of the value, then the transaction costs are not such a big issue. But I think most banks will charge a rand amount per transaction, and then they'll scale up. The bigger the amount, the more they'll charge you. So I think just check those costs. I think it's you just don't want all the interest saving that you're getting on one place to be eroded by paying the bank lots of transaction fees. So understand your costs before you do anything. And then I think the second question will be the interest that you earn. So some of the brokerage accounts, especially if it's a kind of a traditional stockbroker, they will pay you interest, and it's usually not bad. It's, I don't know exactly what it is today, but let's just say it's around 8% a year. And so then it's worthwhile doing one transaction, transferring all the money to the brokerage, and then once a month feeding it in from your cash account into the ETF that you want to buy. Some of the newer platforms where they're doing fractional shareholding and fractional ownership, they might not give you interest, or they give you pathetic interest. And in that case, to me, it doesn't make sense to store your cash with them. It makes sense to keep it and transfer it when you're ready. So I think understanding interest and costs are important. One of the strategies you can follow is, if your bank charges you transaction costs and it's a rand amount per transaction, and you're in a place where there are there is no interest that you can earn on the cash, then you might want to consider doing transactions every second month. So you don't phase in monthly. Let's say your goal was to phase in over 6 months. Then what you could do is, instead of doing one transaction per month for 6 months, you do 3 transactions every second month, so that you still phase in over 6 months, but you just doing it in bigger amounts. And that might be a good combination of reducing your transaction costs and earning interest. So I think have a look and then work out the interest, work out what that is. If they're going to pay you 8%, actually work out the rand amount and compare that to the rand amount of the costs that you're going to be paying the bank for transactions, and break this down right to actual rands and cents. Don't get fixated on percentages, because you might find the amount of cash that you're going to store is quite low, and so the actual rand amount of interest would be low, and then you're keeping it at the bank, and doing lots of transactions, and actually all of the savings that you would have got on the one side, you've lost on the other. So I think it's a good question. It's a good way to kind of just focus your mind on making sure that you're getting every advantage you can, without overcomplicating your life, and equally without making the shareholders of the banks rich. You want to do this for yourself and make sure that you're growing your capital as fast as you can. So thanks so much for your voice note. I just want to say we absolutely love voice notes. So please send voice notes. Messages are boring because I've got to read them and you can't hear them. And so the more voice notes we get, the better. Thanks so much, and please keep sending them in. We're still answering your questions, and the next one was a message that came through, and it's asking, is it advisable to use your access bond as your emergency fund? So just to explain, there are mortgages out there where you can put in extra money into the mortgage every month, and you can draw out that extra money whenever you need it. And if you've got one of those, I think it's a great place to store extra money and actually make it your emergency fund as well. And the explanation is that you if you're paying prime on your mortgage, that's 11.5%. And so if you can store money in your mortgage, what that's doing is you're actually saving the interest on the money, the extra money that you're storing, at a rate of 11.5% a year. And that's a guaranteed rate. It's tax-free because you don't pay tax on the interest you're saving on debt. And it's a certainty. It's an absolute guaranteed investment. So it's guaranteed, high return, no tax, and it helps your monthly bond repayments on kind of getting down as much as you can anyway. So to me, I think it's as close to a no-brainer as you can get to use your access bond as your emergency fund. The only things to check are transaction costs. Just make sure that you're not paying any ridiculous transaction fees. And secondly, that there are no restrictions on drawing that extra money out. So before you kind of put everything in there, what I would do is put in let's say 10,000 rand, and then 3 weeks later just draw out 1,000 rand, just to see what the mechanics of that actually. What happens? Is it easy? Can you do it on your profile? Are there any transaction fees? How long does it take? All of those things. And so it's kind of a test run for an emergency. And if it all goes well, then put your emergency fund in there. And in fact, all of your savings. So if you've got a holiday fund, emergency fund, all of those things, you can store that in your mortgage. Obviously, you have to keep a record of what you're doing and track what you're doing carefully. But to me, it makes all the sense in the world. When interest rates get low in the future, let's say prime one day goes back to 6 or 7%, then we might have a different view. But for now, with very high interest rates, I can't think of a better thing to do than store extra money in your bond until you need it. Thank you so much for the questions. We appreciate them, whether you send them as a message or my favorite, as a voice note, we don't mind. Just to know, we won't always answer every question in the exact detail. Some of you send through kind of like complex financial planning questions that are really specific to you and your mom and your dad and to no one else. And in that case, we think you probably need to go and pay for some advice. But if you ask a question that we think is relevant to everybody, we're certainly going to do our best to answer it. Thanks so much, and please keep those questions and voice notes coming in.
The Stradivarius violin is considered to be the most emotive instrument in the world. That's why you'll often hear it in investment ads, adding drama and the utmost importance to their philosophies, or for the announcement of a fancy new fund manager. 10x investments don't need dramatic instruments to seem impressive. They let the results sing for themselves. So 10x your future without the drama. 10x is a licensed FSP.